people initially went into the non-confrontational, and then I think people realized that the only way, regrettably, to get police administrators and the police service to recognize what they're doing to their own staff was to actually humiliate them in the courts.
If we have to become political to get the message out, then so be it. Because if you're not going to listen, you're going to have to feel. And the service has had to feel because they weren't listening at the certain stages where we were giving them the warning signals.
It's a year and a half since the Metropolitan Police were branded as institutionally racist by the report into the murder of the black teenager Stephen Lawrence. The result of an employment tribunal today will do little to change that view. It's centred on the case of Sergeant Gurpal Verdi, who the force had accused of sending racist hate mail to himself after he became bitter that he'd been passed over for promotion.
I did not walk away. The Metropolitan Police wanted a fight, I gave them a fight. The BPA executives and the members have recognised that. And you'll find now, after my case, a lot are fighting their cases.
There was a stage when the BPA reached where frustration, dissatisfaction about the progress of change in terms of discriminatory treatment and high-profile examples of discriminatory treatment, and the feeling amongst the BPA that just providing a support network, which obviously I was keen to do, and tackling the wastage issue was not sufficient.
My view is that actually far more than the Macpherson inquiry, it was a persistent threat and actuality of complaints and employment tribunal actions that persuaded the Met's management to pay attention to the BPA.
One of the criticisms of the BPA is that they're too political, that they're far too much a pressure group and so on and so forth. But quite frankly, to get things done, to achieve results, to change legislation, I think you've got to be somewhat of a political animal to do that. And I've got no problem with the BPA being political, I've got no problem with being a pressure group.
I have always considered myself a pebble in the shoe of some of my colleagues, not all of them. I'm where the shoe pinches.
The moment he joined the Metropolitan Police from Thames Valley in the late 90s, this officer, commended by the Home Secretary for his work with black officers, was under investigation. The allegations are not quite as long as your arm, but damn close. From cocaine to free calendars to stealing a second-hand jumper, the list goes on.
The only problem that Mr. Desai faced was that he was black. He was a key figure within the National Black Police Association and he challenged racism.
We called for a boycott because we realised that case was totally influenced by very subjective elements against Ali and myself and the BPA as a whole, and someone had to be held to account.
It got to a stage where people felt, you know, that we need to fire a shot across the bow and send a clear, unequivocal message that this will not be tolerated. And that's what the boycott did.
I have to say, I wasn't too keen on that because I didn't think it was very productive. But I think we've been seen our way through that. I think it was the wrong move and said so to Leroy and to others at the time. But they made that decision and one respects the reasons for doing it. I think it was counterproductive.
This was amongst the worst things that they'd seen. And they'd given evidence to a public inquiry. What were they going to do this time?
What was your view then about the BPA threatening a boycott? That was much more militant trade union style than the BPA had ever been before.
Well, the answer is they won, didn't they? That's your answer. It doesn't matter whether they were actually going to do it or not, but they calculated that threatening it would get them the result, and they were right.
Nine days after Richard Taylor's youngest son was murdered, the initial horror and grief are now accompanied by a quiet determination to find those who killed him.
The police must be given all assistance to investigate this case.
I got caught up in it by the fact that it was the most highly publicised case at the time, which reflected the crisis we had on our streets, within our schools.
The wall of silence was there. You know, people didn't want to talk to the police.
This was a high-profile case that we could have a role. And it wasn't for us to be parachuting in and say, we're going to solve all this situation. We thought we could add value.
The method they used was to bring in officers who speak the same language with most members of the community.
There was one Nigerian family who wouldn't even open the door to know who was in there, what made up the family, what they saw, and the female Nigerian officer on the team spoke in Yoruba through the letterbox, and the woman came running out saying, you're Nigerian. And she said, you're a police officer, come in. That legacy of the Damilare investigation, BPA's significant input into that investigation has led to the development and conception of the Cultural and Communities Resource Unit. It's basically structuring the way in which we tap into those life skills of police officers and police staff. We're now in a position to utilise our colleagues in a much more structured way, and I really think that's going to have a significant input into the modernisation of the police service as we know it.